The beacon came in on a prayer frequency. I don't mean that figuratively. I mean the signal was encoded on the veil's liturgical band, a carrier wave they had used for 700 years to transmit hymns between their temple stations, the same one their priests pressed to their foreheads during the rite of open sky. Nobody in the interstellar cooperative used that band for distress signals, because nobody thought to look there. I was looking there because Specialist Odara in my rear seat had been trying to tune in an old music archive for the last 4 hours and had drifted the receiver out to the edges chasing static. When the compressed packet hit, she pulled off her headset and stared at it for a long moment before she said anything. "Pilot, you're going to want to see this." The packet contained 3 things. A set of coordinates on the 3rd moon of the Veil's home system, a place called Sanctum Tether in their tongue, a combined temple-citadel and population shelter that their clerical order had maintained for longer than humanity had had writing. A timestamp showing the signal had been bouncing through relay nodes for 11 days before it found us. And a voice, one of the Veil's high cantors, recording in a language our system translated into something close to a formal religious register, the kind of cadence a man uses when he believes he is speaking his last words into a void. The translation read, "We have sealed the gates. The Rethaki advance holds the perimeter. All allied channels have been silent for 31 days. We do not ask for armies. We ask that someone know we were here, and that we kept the rights, and that we did not break." I filed the intercept with command at Reach Station. Command responded in 40 minutes, fast enough to mean someone senior saw it before it could be buried. The reply authorized 1 ship, mine, and 1 squad of Marines from the garrison. No fleet support, no fighter escort. The Rethaki had 3 cruisers holding the system, and a ground cordon around Sanctum Tether that had been in place for 3 months. I called Sergeant Hale and told him to get his people aboard in 10 minutes. He asked me what the threat picture looked like. I told him the truth. Significant. He said, "Copy. We'll be at the ramp." There are things they don't put in the briefings. One of them is what a 3-month siege looks like from the air when you're punching through at low altitude with the inhibitors spiked and the hull radiating enough scatter field to look, on a Rethaki sensor board, like background debris. I came in over the moon's terminator line, running dark, riding the shadow. Below me, the Rethaki cordon spread across the flatlands in a ring of sensor towers and vehicle tracks and the low orange glow of field heaters. Sanctum Tether sat at the center of that ring like a stone fist. It was a tall structure. All the Veil's sacred architecture runs vertical. They build toward their sky because in their theology, open sky is where the presence of things worth worshipping actually lives. The citadel had 7 towers, and even from 1,000 meters up, I could see that 2 of them had taken strike damage somewhere in the first weeks of the siege. Smoke stains on the pale stone, sections of parapet that had been sealed with emergency foam. But the other 5 were standing. The lights inside were on. I brought the ship down in the inner courtyard on the eastern side of the complex, the only space wide enough for the ramp. I gave command a position marker and an ETA. I told them I needed 40 minutes on the ground. The 40 minutes was a guess. It was based on nothing. I had no idea what I was going to find. What I found was 312 Veil. They had compressed themselves into the lower sanctum of the main temple, a vaulted chamber about the size of a large warehouse, lined with the carved stonework their order had been adding to for generations. Every surface at eye level held a candle, or an oil lamp, or a chemical light stick. The air was thick with incense smoke, and the smell of too many bodies in a sealed space for too long. In one corner, their medical station had been set up along a row of prayer benches. Along the far wall, children were asleep in rows, on what had been liturgical robes folded into pallets. The priest commander was a Veil, named Verath Sel. He was old by their standards. The dusky purple of his species' skin had gone lighter at his brow ridges, and along the line of his jaw, the color fading toward the pale that marks age in their caste, and his vestment robes had been mended in at least 4 places with thread that didn't quite match. He was standing at the center of the chamber when Sergeant Hale and I came through the inner door, and he was mid-sentence in what sounded, even untranslated, like a formal recitation. The congregation around him, elders, laborers, temple assistants, children, had their eyes closed and their hands pressed together in the Veil gesture of reception, palms up, fingers spread, as if they were waiting to receive something from above. He stopped when he heard the door. He turned. He looked at me. He looked at Sergeant Hale. He looked at the 4 Marines standing behind Hale in full gear. Visors up, because I had told Hale visors up. It matters. I don't know why it always matters, but it does. And I watched his face do something I have seen only twice in this work. And both times, it has been in a room where the people inside had decided they were going to die. He sat down, not from weakness. He simply sat down on the step of the altar behind him, and he pressed both his palms to his own chest, and he closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, there was something different in them. The incense was still burning. The children along the wall didn't wake up. I crossed the chamber and crouched in front of him, because he was seated, and I didn't want to loom, and I said through the translator, "We received your signal 11 days ago. It took us time to get here." He said, "I know. The relay nodes are slow in this system." I said, "We have 1 ship. We can take everyone who can be moved. We'll have to make 2 lifts for the injured." He said, "There are no Rethaki inside the walls?" I said, "Not yet. My crew is holding the perimeter. We have a window." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, and the translator gave me this in the formal register, the same one he had been using for the recitation. "We called toward the heavens and we named every ally we had ever stood beside. We named the Council. We named the Tessine Compact. We named the 4 fleet lords who had taken our hospitality in this hall." He paused. None of them descended. I didn't have an answer for that. "There isn't one." He said, "And then you came." I said, "Yes." He said, "And this was in the plain register, not the formal one, the way a person speaks when the ceremony is over, and the actual thing is happening. I did not know humans came to places like this." I said, "We come to a lot of places." He stood up. He was taller than me by a head, the way the Vale elders tend to run, and he looked down at me with an expression that I have tried since then to find a word for, and have not quite managed. Not gratitude. Or not only that, something older than gratitude. The look of a man who has been proven wrong about something he had quietly believed for a very long time. He turned to his congregation and said something I didn't catch in full, but the translator gave me the last part. "Come. Help is here. We move." They moved. 312 people. The injured on improvised stretchers carried by the young men and the Marines. The children woken gently from their pallets and carried on shoulders. The old ones with their arms around anyone who could walk beside them. The last thing Veroth did before he left the sanctum was lift one of the oil lamps from its bracket and carry it himself, burning, out through the courtyard and up the ramp of my ship, unwilling, I understood later, to leave the light entirely behind in that stone room, as if the place deserved at least that much, after everything. We made 2 lifts. We lost no one. When the second lift cleared the cordon, I filed the post-action log with command. Standard format. Coordinates, timestamp, head count, threat assessment on departure. At the bottom, in the notes field, where most pilots write nothing, I wrote, 312 souls recovered. Sanctum tether, 3rd moon of the Vale system. The senior priest carried the fire out himself. I don't know what they were praying for when we came through that door. I know it wasn't us. I don't think that makes any difference. Command sent back an acknowledgement. The Vale don't have a word in their formal liturgical register for what we are. 11 months after the evacuation, a translation scholar published a note in a closed journal that Veroth had used an informal term for us in a letter to one of his surviving cantors. The term translated, approximately, as, "the ones who came down when the sky did not answer." I've been called worse.